I love the Halo games. I never really got the appeal of Xbox as I was getting into gaming until I bought a used Xbox One from someone I knew and picked up a copy of Halo the Master Chief Collection. Almost instantly, upon starting Combat Evolved, I got it. I got why people love this series so much, and I got why Xbox had maintained such a strong brand over the years. But aside from my relation to the Halo games, the other side of the franchise that I love is the many adaptations the series has gotten over the years. Video game adaptations are a special interest to me, and I thought it would be fun to go through all the different adaptations Halo has gotten over the years, as well as some of the cancelled projects, and discuss my thoughts on them as someone who not only has a film degree, but also someone that knows a lot about video game movies and TV shows. We're starting off with a bit of a strange one here, but I'm going to go through all of them chronologically, so if anything, it will immediately prove the title of this video. Let's get started. Hidden as a message in a Halo 2 trailer, ilovebees.com would send the people that found the message to a website that was meant to appear as though an artificial intelligence had taken over a simple beekeeping website. Players of the ARG, created by marketing company 42 Entertainment, had to solve different puzzles and other hidden items in order to unlock audio logs that would reveal the story of an AI that had gotten trapped on Earth, as it tried to put itself back together. Over the course of the ARG, players were tasked with more and more grandiose tasks, such as using coordinates and times to figure out which certain payphones across the country were going to ring and when. It's told that a particularly hardcore player awaited the payphone ring in Florida while a hurricane was just minutes away. This evolved into the game contacting people through other means, such as emails and even calls to the players' personal cell phones. Players were even given the chance to meet up and get a chance to interact with the characters in person. Once the game was over, players of the ARG were invited to a select few theaters around the country to play Halo 2 early and receive a commemorative DVD for their efforts containing the full audio drama. I really wish I was around for this, because honestly I don't feel like a marketing company could get away with something like this now, and I don't even think most would bother, because the puzzles that were involved in this were crazy, and I can't imagine the thrill of being a part of something like this. The audio files are still up on YouTube, and I think it's pretty okay. It's not bad by any stretch of the word, but I think just listening to the audio by itself without any of the fun puzzles and outside world stuff alongside it just takes away too much of the fun of what I Love Bees stood for. I think Halo is a great franchise to put in audio drama format, and they have done this again with amazing success that we'll talk about later. It's an amazing part of gaming history. I just think it's one of those you had to be there moments where listening to it isolated years later doesn't get the same feeling across. Way back in 2005, Halo was at a peak in the gaming industry, having just released Halo 2 the year prior. This caught the attention of then president of Columbia Pictures, Peter Schlessel. In his own time, he commissioned screenwriter Alex Garland to draft a script. In order to pitch the draft to studios for funding, Microsoft would send couriers dressed as Master Chief to deliver the draft to studio heads. Unfortunately, because of the amount of money Microsoft was looking for, most studios turned them down. Eventually, though, Universal Pictures and 20th Century Fox signed a deal to co-produce the script. A number of directors negotiated to be part of the film, namely Guillermo del Toro, before Neil Blomkamp was ultimately chosen as the director. Beyond him, Peter Jackson was attached as executive producer, and screenwriters D.B. Weiss and Josh Olson joined to rewrite Garland's original draft. Production was extremely rocky, being restarted several times. Eventually, the constant delays angered 20th Century Fox enough that they dropped out of the production. This left Universal as the sole financer, who then got into a debate with Jackson and Schlessel about the contracts. Universal was unhappy with their first dollar revenue deal, which means that they started making money upon the film's release instead of when the studio turned a profit. Jackson and Schlessel refused to get rid of this, which made Universal also drop out of the production, ending it before anything had even properly been done. Neil Blomkamp was kept, though, going on to produce our next entry. While I was doing research for this video, I had decided that I wasn't going to include any live action or animated ads that were produced, since there is numerous of them and most are quick without much to talk about. But as I looked further in, there were a couple that I decided to include here since they're more than simple ads. Halo Landfall is definitely one of them. Leading up to the release of Halo 3, a series of shorts were made that told the story of a team of Spartans fighting on the front lines. Put together, the short film is around 7 minutes long, and in that 7 minutes, they managed to shove so much action and set pieces in. If this was a look into what the feature film was going to look like under Neil Blomkamp, I really wish it got made. For the early 2000s, the CGI is very realistic, and the costumes and props are super well made for what was just a series of ad shorts. It really feels like Halo, even with extremely little dialogue. The short film is still available on Bungie's YouTube channel, and you should absolutely go check it out because it's more than worth it. The concept for an anime compilation set in the Halo universe was born out of the want to tell smaller stories in the world while not being set to a specific art style. It took a few years to get the ball rolling, but once it did, a number of animation studios were approached. Although they were excited to be a part of it, many of the studios were hesitant to create their own stories. In light of that, a number of different scripts and outlines were drafted to inspire the studios, although they were still allowed to shape it as much as they pleased. Even with this power, project lead Frank O'Connor stated that around 50% of the dialogue stayed the same from the story treatments that the studios were given. The compilation was released on DVD and Blu-ray and premiered in AMC Metreon in San Francisco on February 10th. The reception was overall positive, with most critics stating that although the mix of Japanese art styles with the universe of Halo was an odd one, it ended up still making for a worthwhile watch. Out of all the different adaptations, this is one that I was probably the most excited to watch. I was a big fan of Star Wars Visions when it came out, so with this sharing a very similar concept to that, but in the Halo universe, I didn't see where it could possibly go wrong. The opening shots that recap the entire Halo franchise were for sure my favorite, although all of them had at least something enjoyable about them. The only art style I didn't particularly like was the duel. I mean, I see the artistic appeal to it, but I think the watercolor style did not lend itself very well to me as a pleasant viewing experience. I did find it funny that, for the most part, out of all the shorts, they're fairly serious and deal with some really dark topics, except for Odd One Out, which is a really funny fitting name for it. That instead of going the same route as the others, went full anime with long screams, over-the-top battles, and a humorous plot. It was fun to watch, but was for sure a whiplash. This collection as a whole is a fun watch, and I believe it's streaming in a few places, so you should give it a try. In an effort to widen Halo's appeal even further, and after the success of other live-action endeavors such as Landfall, 343 Industries decided they wanted to try for a full miniseries, leading up to the release of Halo 4. To write the series, 343 interviewed a number of different candidates, including Aaron and Todd Helbing, who had written a pitch surrounded for Planet Harvest. Although that pitch is not what ended up getting made, 343 was impressed by the two's understanding of the Halo universe, and they were brought on to write the screenplay. The miniseries was given a $10 million budget, which is incredibly high for marketing material, but also fairly low for television pilots. As described by director Stuart Hemler, we're either the best-funded web series of all time, a sort of mid-road healthy TV pilot, or a super low-budget movie. The series was shot over the course of 25 days in the forest of Vancouver, with the Legacy Effects returning to do the same set design, having also been the set designer for Landfall and the Life shorts previously. To make sure the actors were all in their peak performance, the production team had all of them go through boot camp, which also allowed them to feel more comfortable performing in the armor. The cast ended up overexerting themselves to the point of vomiting, but still looked back at it fondly and called it a bonding experience. The series was released on a weekly basis on both Machinima Prime and Halo Waypoint, and then later compiled into a 90-minute extended movie that was included with the limited edition of Halo 4 as well as standard DVD and Blu-ray releases. It was reviewed well with critics, with most stating that the CGI was impressive, as well as the overall score. In my personal thoughts, the movie was pretty good. I was a fan of how they humanized the Halo franchise in a way that, at my watching up to this point, I think they had barely scratched the surface of. The relationship between the two main characters were especially a high point, and the acting overall was a fairly strong aspect. Similar to the critics, I was also impressed by the CGI. The Covenant especially came out surprisingly well in live action, even if they did overuse the invisibility ability a tad too much to save what I would presume is a ton of money in animation time. I do feel like the first few parts are a little slow, but I can at least appreciate that this, along with most other Halo adaptations, are mostly done to stress the expansive world building, which for an uber nerd like me is all I've ever wanted out of a sci-fi or fantasy, so I can excuse a slow opening. This was definitely a good first attempt, but I'm curious what they can do with a bit more budget and time. To promote the Master Chief Collection, Microsoft teamed up with director Ridley Scott alongside his production company Scott Free Productions to produce a new live-action Halo show. Scott would be the executive producer, and the script was written by Paul T. Schewing, with Sergio Mimica Genzin directing. After the success of Forward Unto Dawn, the decision was made to release Nightfall in the same format, with 5 episodes being released weekly on Halo Channel. It serves as both an origin story for Agent Locke, as well as a general connection between the events of Halo 4 and 5. Although being exclusive to Halo Channel at first, Nightfall eventually made its way to various streaming platforms, but was also released on DVD and Blu-ray. Out of all the Halo series I've watched so far, this one was one of the most exciting. Even if it had a similar budget to Forward Unto Dawn, I believe they took the budget way farther in this series, and really made the most of what they could do with the format that they had. The strongest aspect of this series, though, is its characters. The dialogue is written so well, and the relationship and dynamics between each person just feel so well done and natural. This is for sure my favorite one so far. It was a really cool watch. Leading up to the release of Halo 5 Guardians, 343 contracted the Asienberg Group to create an ARG-based audio drama, as well as a number of other marketing offshoots. Collectively, this would become known as Hunt the Truth, an episodic series of audio files that expanded upon the world and story of the upcoming game. Episodes were released weekly through the official Hunt the Truth Tumblr page. It was overseen by Noah Heichen, Eisenberg's creative director. The series has an all-star cast, including but not limited to Keegan-Michael Key, Phil Lamar, Tara Strong, and Troy Baker. It ran for 2 seasons and concluded on September 22, 2015, a little over a month before the release of the game. I'm personally a big fan of audiobooks, so when I heard that this and I Love Bees existed, I was very excited. First thing that surprised me when listening to this was just how crazy the cast is. For something that is only supposed to be marketing material, I can't even imagine what the budget must have been on voice cast alone. I also find it interesting that they chose to put it on Tumblr of all places. Like, I know it was big in its time, but I feel like it just doesn't fit what you would think for a traditional marketing campaign. I do think doing an audio drama like this one, told as a podcast of sorts, does a really good job at expanding any universe you put it in, mostly by adding the perspective of a civilian within that universe. Regardless though, this story is amazing, and the aforementioned voice cast makes it all the better to listen to. The narrator was especially good. I found him very soothing, and his pronunciation of everything made it super easy to understand. The entire nearly 6-hour-long drama is still available on YouTube, and if you're a fan of audiobooks or podcasts, I suggest giving this one a listen. Shortly after the success of Halo Combat Evolved, novelist Eric Neelan approached Microsoft with a proposition that he wanted to write a book set within the world of Halo. After a deal was signed, Eric wrote the book in just 7 weeks, a time frame that Eric has said was a personal record. The book was a massive success, selling over 1 million copies. Due to this success, screenwriter Stuart Beattie approached Neeland with a spec script and interest in making a film adaptation of the book. Those initial plans fell through, but the idea was picked back up a number of years later by Vancouver animation group Sequence, leading up to the release of Halo 5 Guardians. It was released as a downloadable miniseries before being compiled into a feature-length Blu-ray and DVD later on. This movie is pretty solid. I've not personally read the book, so I don't have any knowledge on how well it's adapted, although just by watching the movie, I can tell that in some places they maybe followed the book a little too closely. Some of the monologue and narrations that the characters gave felt like I was just listening to the VA read directly from the book. Not that this is wholly a bad thing, but it made a lot of the dialogue and other interactions feel unnatural in places. I also wasn't the biggest fan of the animation overall. The environments and armor were really good, but the biggest thing that ruined it for me was the faces. For some reason, none of their faces looked right, and the lip syncing felt really bad in places. There are some positives though. I think the story and origin of Master Chief was really well written, and the characters feel like the relationship was very natural, despite the strange dialogue delivery here and there. The action scenes were also really well done, especially the final fight with the Covenant at the end of the series. The disc for this is pretty cheap nowadays, so I'd say if you're a big fan of Halo and care about the lore, it would be a good way to experience the book without having to read it. The idea for a Halo TV show was something that first began discussions in 2013 when Xbox Entertainment signed on Steven Spielberg, alongside his production company, Amblin Television, to produce the series. This version of the series was set for a 2015 release date, although that year came and passed with little details, other than that the show was still in development. Rupert Wyatt was then signed on to be the show's director and executive producer, with a new 2019 release date stated. Shortly after, the show was given a series order through television network Showtime, although it would once again miss its proposed release date. Stating scheduling conflicts, Wyatt stepped down from his roles and was replaced with Otto Bathurst, and Kyle Keelan was added by Showtime to be the series showrunner. Filming for the show finally commenced in October of 2019, hitting multiple roadblocks after the breakout of the pandemic in early 2020. After a brief hiatus, filming for the 9-episode first season concluded in February of 2021. Believing that it no longer fit in with any of these shows on their production slate, a decision was made to move the release from Showtime to Paramount+, although Showtime would retain its splash screen at the beginning of each episode. Critics and fans were very mixed upon release, with the biggest contention point being the writing of both the story and characters. Despite criticism, the show was a success and ended up earning a second season. Despite being received better than the first, the decision was made to cancel the show after its second season. As of writing this video, Xbox and Spielberg have announced their intentions to find a new home for the show to continue on. I was ready to hate this show. I remember when it first came out and people were so upset about one thing or another. I wasn't too familiar with the franchise at the time, so I just took this at face value and avoided the show. However, now that I've watched the first season, I cannot stress enough how much I love this show. Now, I did only watch season 1, so this is what my thoughts are based on. The biggest point I'll start with is how I view this show. If you're a major fan of the deeper side of Halo lore, you will probably dislike this. The way I see it, this show took all of the elements of the Halo universe and crafted their own story around it. Reviewing it as a sci-fi show that uses Halo elements makes this show way better. The only element of the story I didn't like was just how much screen time was taken by the B story revolving around Quan Ha. I understand her place in the beginning of the story, but once we're multiple hours in and the stakes of the Spartan storyline has peaked, I hated that we then spent an entire episode on Quan having an acid trip with some witches in the desert. It felt like an entire other show stapled onto Halo. The highlight, though, was undoubtedly Cortana. Whoever wrote her dialogue absolutely nailed it, and seeing Jen Taylor get to play her in live action was a treat. The other point I will argue is that I completely understand why they had John take his helmet off. I understand why people were mad, but with how emotional and character-driven the story of Master Chief is, I feel like a lot of it would have been lost or not possible if they were stuck with the limitation of what emotion can be conveyed with the helmet on. Overall, I really liked the show, and I will have to look into Season 2 since I heard it's even better. Overall, Halo has quite a good track record when it comes to movie and TV adaptations. There are definitely some that are better than others, but I wouldn't say any particular project I watched was bad. The current Halo show was the biggest surprise for me, given the opinions on it I heard online when it first came out. So with that in mind, I'm excited to see what 343, now Halo Studios, cooks up next for this franchise on the silver screen. It's not super hard to find any of these projects. Most of them have had DVD or Blu-ray releases, or are free on YouTube. If you're a fan of the games and want to dive deeper into the universe, there are far worse ways you could do it than watching the Halo TV shows and listening to the audio dramas. What do you think of the Halo adaptations? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe while you're down there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.